What is up, everybody? Thank you for tuning into episode 8 of Faux Football. This is the very real podcast about everyone's favorite fake sport, fantasy football. I'm your host, Chu. You can follow me on Twitter at Father Dynasty and check out the website, also named fatherdynasty.com. And you can check out the Substack with articles. You can check out this podcast either on the website or the links to where you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And also have a link to my rankings, which are over at Fantasy Pros, which is the weekly rankings for those redraft monsters, and some dynasty rankings that are updated intermittently. Kind of don't want to be too reactionary to what is ultimately a multi-year, long-term type of mindset. On this week's episode, we've got Week 8 happening in the NFL, and so we're looking at bye week hell, which is this week has the most teams on a bye, flex and bust out, which is looking at some flex options, and this or that, which is a little bit of start sit and a little bit of just kind of my projection on who I think will perform better over another closely ranked player. So without further ado, let's get into bye week hell.
Bye week hell, by the way. I didn't even mention that.
So bye week hell, some people call it bye-mageddon, if you will. This is the 1 week of the NFL season having the most teams on their bye week. And that is, of course, this week, Week 8. That is the Arizona Cardinals, Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams, and the Seattle Seahawks. So that, along with injuries and that underperformance and what have you, is probably leading people to scramble at this point. What I like to do is I like to look at the teams that are on a bye, especially this week, and point out, pick out 2 players that in my Yahoo 10-team Start 8 redraft league, which I think is relatively standard for redraft leagues, where I have these players that are on waivers that in a pinch you could pick up and are ideally likely available in those leagues. And starting out with the quarterbacks, you're without your Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, although he might be on the outs anyway, Matthew Stafford, and Sam Darnold. So a couple of those are big hits. A couple of the other ones are, not quite as much of a bother. But 2 of the people I'm looking at here are Joe Flacco going up against the Jets and Michael Penix going up against the Dolphins. So Joe Flacco, this will be his 3rd game in the orange and black, and it's been going pretty well. Turns out that despite being behind another not very good O-line and not really being supported by a good defense, doesn't really seem to matter because he has weapons in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Noah Fant's not a slouch. Chase Brown's not too bad. But overall, the Jets is a reasonable matchup. Certainly, recently we've seen teams do decently well against them, and I think we've seen what Joe Flacco can do, again, with those weapons such as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Michael Penix, he is questionable. I think he's gotten in some limited practices thus far. Again, I'm recording this on Friday, so I don't know for Friday if he has actually gotten a full practice in yet. But he's someone to kind of monitor. It's mostly just because he's going up against the Dolphins, an atrocious defense, and I think the Falcons' offense has been kind of clicking and getting in a groove. So pretty optimistic about Penix connecting with London and Pitts and Bijan Robinson, so if you need to, you can look there. And going over to running backs, that'll be you're without whichever Cardinals running back you want to point out. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Ashton Jeanty, Kyron Williams, and the combo of Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. And 2 that I've got here are both backups, but I think are pretty notable backups. So the 2 I'm looking to add if need be, Tyler Algier, of course, I already mentioned one of the Falcons there with Michael Penix. Tyler Algier going up against the Dolphins, and Justice Hill going up against the Bears. So Algier is a high-end handcuff, but it's also because he's involved even if Bijan is entirely healthy. We've seen that a number of times. He has touchdown upside, and I think that against the Dolphins, it's going to be a runaway game for them. The Falcons' defense is strong and getting stronger. Going up against a Dolphins offense that has just been a massive question mark and just a roller coaster, and I think we're all collectively waiting to see who's getting fired, who's getting traded, what have you in Miami. So there's that upside there for Algier, especially with the touchdown upside. And Justice Hill, Ravens are coming off of a bye. As best I understand it, at this point, Lamar Jackson should be playing. I think that should help the offense as a whole. Don't feel great about the defense with the Ravens. Of course, they still have plenty of some more season-ending injuries and others just tremendous underperformance. And going up against the Bears, an offense that has been improving week over week. So I think it'll be a fairly high-scoring affair. And Justice Hill, a lot of it has been game script, but Derrick Henry is not, dominating the snap share in that backfield. And Justice Hill is a trusted running back on that team. So I do like a little bit of PPR upside and the chance to break a long play for a touchdown against the Bears defense. Going over to the wide receivers, so you'd be without Marvin Harrison Jr., you'd be without Amon-Ra St. Brown, you'd be without, you can either say Brian Thomas or you can say Travis Hunter. You'd be without Jacoby Myers, you'd be without Puka Nacua, which you already were, and Devontae Adams, and you'd be without, and this is a tough one, Jackson Smith and Jigba. So all of that to say, 2 wide receivers that I'm looking at that you could get to fill in for the week. Alec Ayomanor going up against the Indianapolis Colts, and Jalen Noel going up against the San Francisco 49ers. So the first one there, Ayomanor, not too sure on Ridley's status to this point, but again, we've seen him be a viable flex option even when Ridley's healthy. Ayomanor is a little bit touchdown dependent given what his role is. He's going to get his 5 to 8 targets, let's call it. And but given where he plays on the field and the optimism of this matchup going up against the Colts DBs, I like my chances there. And a player who was very high on coming out of college, again, he's had a good rookie year when he's gotten these opportunities in what was initially a pretty crowded wide receiver room, and now it's become a pretty hobbled one. And Jalen Noel going up against the Niners, again, not a slam dunk matchup necessarily. But I think that you saw with Nico Collins going down, Christian Kirk has been battling injuries really the entire season. Noel has stepped up pretty big, and I'm optimistic that he and Schultz and his former teammate Higgins are all going to step up in the absence of these other receivers. And, I have my doubts about Stroud and the kind of fall off since his rookie season and the lack of an offensive line they put around him. But, I think Noel, certainly in a pinch, you have 6 teams on a bye. Noel is the very ideal third wide receiver or flex option if you are in a pinch with bye weeks and injuries and that sort of thing. And the last position, looking at tight end, this is a pretty rough one, as you'd be without McBride, Laporta, Long, because it's no longer Strange there, Bowers and or Mayer, because he's been without Bowers for a little bit, Higbee and Ferguson in L.A., and then, of course, A.J. Barner or Arroyo in Seattle. And 2 that I've got here, I got 2 veterans. Evan Ingram going up against the Dallas Cowboys, and Noah Fant going up against the New York Jets. Of course, I mentioned that already with Flacco. 2 interesting ones, kind of for different reasons, though. So Evan Ingram, again, I like the matchup already going up against the Cowboys defense, although they had a pretty good week last week. But I think Ingram his role has been growing, and I think that's, there's reason for optimism there. And I'm not expecting a tremendous game from him, but I think if you're looking to just kind of have a Band-Aid for the week, especially at tight end, I really like to just go matchup, and I think he's involved enough to where I feel good about that. Noah Fant, it is his tight end room with Mike Gesicki on the IR, and with Flacco in town, Fant has done reasonably well. Again, the targets are not, or he's not a PPR machine by any means. But get him his 3 to 5 catches and hope that one's going to be for a touchdown. Offense is doing better, getting in scoring position, and Fant is a good red zone option. So looking forward to both of those guys hopefully getting a touchdown. We'll see. So Godspeed to anyone and everyone out there battling the Week 8 Bye-Mageddon, and pick up some of these guys if you need them. But that does it for Bye Week Hell. And let's get into Flex and Bust Out.
I'm going to flex and bust out of here.
Flex and Bust Out, this is looking at players at the running back and wide receiver position ranked outside the top 36 of those positions, and that is based on the Fantasy Pros consensus ranking. So kind of getting a look at, all right, what is the consensus, most broadly, and who could possibly be available for you to plug in or be considering for Flex this week. And looking at my cumulative score, got 54.62%. So I kind of view it as the intermediate range is the 52 to just under 55%. It's kind of like a break-even so-so record, and then getting 55 or over is probably more ideal. So getting closer. Had a good week, so trying to get a little bit of momentum here going into through week 8. And last week's hits, we had R.J. Harvey and Jeremy McNichols hitting, and the misses was Jerome Ford. And week 8, we've got Tyrone Tracy coming in as running back 37. Decent matchup going up against the Eagles. He is clearly second fiddle to Cam Scatabo, but I'm optimistic. Just seeing his usage this past game and understanding that, Scatabo is someone who can be used on the ground, in the air, trust him in pass pro, all those things. But Tracy certainly has more of a home run threat when it comes to his speed and his burst, and something that they may need against a high-powered Philly offense just to keep up. Next is Sean Tucker, a running back 43 on the week, going up against the New Orleans Saints. A very good matchup, and with the expectation that it's him filling in behind Rachaad White. Rachaad White's been doing tremendously well. Sean Tucker has not thus far gotten as many touches as I thought he would. That's not a slight to Rachaad White. Rachaad White's done tremendously well. But this is just looking at this matchup and thinking that Tucker may get a little more involved if the game kind of gets away from the Saints and they want to not overuse Rachaad White in the off chance that Bucky Irving is out for even longer than he already has been. And last but not least, Devin Neal coming in at the running back 49, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A so-so matchup, but this will be his first full game. I think it was during last game was when Kendre Miller went out with his injury, knee injury. He'll be out for the season. Devin Neal, liked him coming out of college. This is his rookie season, of course, and getting a chance to fill in behind a not quite as effective as we remember Alvin Kamara. Doesn't necessarily mean that Devin Neal is going to become an immediate 1B option. He could be just a clear-cut second option there. But hoping that he is getting enough touches there, and really this one for me is just an optimism and a go get my guy kind of pick, as I like Devin Neal coming out of college, like I said. So hoping that he's able to slip into the top 36 of running backs for fantasy. And wide receivers, last week we had the hit of Tez Johnson, massive hit, and the misses of Alec Ayomanor and Jordan Whittington. That last one was a real bummer. In week 8, the wide receiver ones that we've got on here, this one may have changed, that he may have slipped inside the top 36 by the time you're actually looking to see who's look at this list. Look at the ranking, excuse me. And Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 42. And this was done once he was already healthy, but I think it's more so the limitation of how he's performed thus far coming back from injury and the fact that it's Marcus Mariota at quarterback. And they are going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. So not a great matchup, so-so, but it's his first game back. He's back. Deebo Samuel, as far as I know, is healthy and is going to play. So the full complement of weapons there for Washington, but of course it's Mariota instead of Daniels under center. But this Chiefs defense has been picking up steam. The offense has been really picking up steam, especially this being the second game with Rashee Rice back. And they're going to do tremendously well. I expect the Chiefs to win, but I am optimistic that Terry McLaurin is going to get his feet under him, get back on track, and again, top 36 for a wide receiver of Terry McLaurin's caliber, I think is reasonable to expect. Next is same game, but other side, and it's Marquise Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 47, of course, going up against the Commanders. Much better matchup going up against the Commanders than it is the Commanders going up against the Chiefs from a wide receiver perspective. And going for the touchdown upside, I think he's got 3 in the last 2 games. And again, one of those was this past game where usage was not quite as high. Certainly, Rashee Rice was in. You're kind of seeing the Chiefs offense operate at its full capacity, more or less. But yeah, I am optimistic about him having that touchdown upside, his usage in this offense. There's some of those guys that, the Chiefs clearly just kind of glob onto and trust, and Marquise Hollywood Brown having a healthy, knock on wood, season thus far. I think they've been waiting for this after they've signed him to a couple of one-year deals. We're seeing it kind of finally pay off, and outside of a touchdown, I don't know that he's going to end up being top 36, but optimistic for that. And Last but not least, from this spot here, I talked about him earlier, Jalen Noel. He is the wide receiver 54 on the week, going up against the 49ers, like I said. Again, so-so matchup, but it's going to be him lined up with his college teammate and Jaden Higgins. Excited for that, but excited for Noel to likely be the wide receiver, especially in PPR, to own from a fantasy perspective. And that does it for the flex and bust out, the guys that I think are going to be finishing inside of the top 36 despite being ranked outside of it. Now let's go ahead and get into this or that.
No, this or that.
This or that, looking at two closely ranked players for week 8, and that's according to Fantasy Pros consensus rankings, and then kind of comparing them against my own rankings and kind of seeing where there's some difference there, and me kind of calling my shots as far as who I think will do better. And for some of these, it could be who's more of a start-sit decision. So first up, we have for the quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson going up against the Chicago Bears, Josh Allen going up against the Carolina Panthers. I really like this as a spot for Lamar Jackson, his first game back after his hamstring injury. Again, I also was just on a bye, so the idea is the wheels are up for this offense. Can't speak much to that defense, but I think there's going to be quite a shootout there, and optimistic that Lamar Jackson's going to pick back up where he left off. Been a tough season so far for even when he was healthy, but I believe in him in that offense. And Josh Allen, it's not really a slight to him in terms of him having a bad year or anything like that. The Panthers defense has been better in recent weeks. Again, it's Josh Allen, so he's going to do Josh Allen things. But I do think that this is going to be very much a ground and pound type of mentality, giving the ball to James Cook a good amount, especially with the Bills fresh off of a bye. Everyone's fresh and ready to go. So, again, they'll both do well, but I have like the upside of Lamar Jackson here. And next one up for the quarterbacks, it's Andy Dalton going up against the Bills, like I mentioned there, and Marcus Mariota going up against the Chiefs. Both matchups are kind of similar. I probably like Dalton's matchup a little bit better. But from the standpoint of this is just a battle of the backups, and Andy Dalton, beyond capable, very high-end backup quarterback in the NFL, and I think given how this offense has been looking better, I do think a lot of it does ride on the confidence and comfort of Bryce Young, but I think a lot of it is also a lot of the continuity in the offensive line, although they have been banged up a little bit, and getting a lot of these other players back. You have McMillan getting more and more comfortable. You have Jalen Coker, minimally involved last week, but getting back and getting comfortable as well. So overall, you have the backfield very strong there in Carolina. So optimistic about Dalton outperforming Mariota, which Mariota's had some good games this year in relief of Jaden Daniels, but I just really like the Dalton matchup a little bit better and expect him to get back to his red rifle ways. And next for running backs, we've got James Cook going up against the Carolina Panthers. I don't know. I keep repeating all the matchups, even though I know you know them by the fact that I've already said them 5,000 times. But James Cook going up against the Panthers, and then Devon Achane going up against the Washington Commanders. Both of these, from a running back perspective, fairly comparable in terms of type of matchup. But Achane is that offense almost entirely. Waddle has elevated his role there. Blake Washington has a little bit, but it's Achane that's getting a bulk of the production from a offensive weapons standpoint. But like I said, why I have Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen, it's not that I think Josh Allen's going to do poorly. I think James Cook is going to, and pardon the on-the-nose pun, cook. I think that James Cook is going to have a multi-touchdown game. Presumably, it all be on the ground, but he can be used a bit in the pass game, although they do have Ty Johnson to take a bit of that work. But I think Cook is going to have just a tremendous game against the Panthers. And next up, a couple of question marks, let's just say, at the running back position this year. They've had some ups, they've had some downs, and that is Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Cleveland Browns, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, or Bill, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is an interesting one because, Bill has had just a roller coaster of a season thus far. But, and I like his matchup going up against the Chiefs better than Ramondre going up against the Browns. But Ramondre Stevenson, for any of the fumbling issues that he had last year, again, that was under a different regime technically, that have carried over into this season, I can really appreciate what the Patriots are doing with the stability of, hey, you guys are on the team. Ramondre Stevenson, you have this role. Travion Henderson, you have this role. I know Gibson's out for the year. I think it's Bernard or whatever his name is, the guy that they called up from their practice squad to be a special teamer and also eat into the work of Travion Henderson, which is wild. But Stevenson's upside, I trust Drake May, but I also trust Stevenson's role and touchdown upside when he's getting in those advantageous positions in the red zone and in the 5 and the 10. So yeah, I like that upside. And Krosky Merritt, I mean, it's gonna be a shootout there, and Bill is not the receiving back. That would be Jeremy Nichols. So optimistic for Stevenson to outscore JCM. Wide receiver, we have Rashee Rice going up against the Washington Commanders, and I like him over CeeDee Lamb going up against the Denver Broncos. Might be fairly obvious, given that it's anyone going up against the Denver Broncos, especially the number one receiver, ideally. Well, not ideally, but possibly being locked up by Patrick Surtain is not a good omen by any means, but CeeDee Lamb is one of those rare breeds that, you're not going to sit CeeDee Lamb just because he's going up against a good defense and a good cornerback. But Rashee Rice, we quickly saw what they've been waiting to use him for and how they like to use him. Going to go up against a strong and very favorable matchup for him in the Washington Commanders. And again, the only concern would be that going up against a fairly weak defense with Washington and an offense that will be under Marcus Mariota's tutelage and not Jaden Daniels, is that they'll spread the ball around. They don't need to force feed Rice, and you're just kind of hoping for a touchdown. But I do think that Rice will get his reasonable target share or touch share as he can be used creatively. And CeeDee Lamb, I think, is going to do well. It's CeeDee Lamb. I think Pickens doesn't disappear. You have Jake Ferguson. They're not going to shy away from establishing the run with Javonte Williams. So just thinking that Lamb's upside is maybe capped a little bit. Next up, a matchup you maybe have heard about a couple thousand times. Teteroa McMillan going up against the Buffalo Bills. Jalen Waddle going up against the Atlanta Falcons. So I like McMillan's chances better in the matchup up against the Buffalo Bills, but that's not the main reason. Again, like I mentioned with Dalton, I do still trust Dalton as a thrower of the football. And I think what we've seen from Tua in recent weeks, certainly this past week with the down performance for Jalen Waddle and a number of the players there. Atlanta, their defense as a whole is tremendous. They're also battling some injuries. But I think I trust much more McMillan's target share and upside against the Bills' defense, than I do the same with Waddle going up against the Falcons. And the last position to talk about, tight end. I've got Tucker Kraft going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have him outperforming Tyler Warren, the rookie sensation, going up against the Tennessee Titans. Again, a bit of this is matchup. You have Tucker Kraft going up against the Steelers, a pretty strong matchup for them. And Warren, not a bad matchup at all, going up against the Titans, a little less favorable. And, of course, Warren has a pretty secure and safe role in that offense in Indy. This is kind of similar to the Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen one. I expect both Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren to do very good. How I'm viewing this, though, is I do think that Kraft will he's a very dynamic player, much like Warren is as well. But I think Kraft will have a very good game that will be able to outshine, even just a little bit, that of Tyler Warren. And the last one for the week, Evan Ingram going up against the Dallas Cowboys and Cade Otton going up against the New Orleans Saints. Love the matchup against the Cowboys for Ingram. That's why I'm going with Ingram over Otton this week. Otton, it's been interesting. So last year, I think we've seen him rise to the occasion in certain weeks, getting a shocking amount of targets, being able to convert those into touchdowns. There's been a little bit of that this year, but especially considering the number of injuries to the pass catchers in Tampa Bay, I think we would have expected more of that, and we haven't quite seen it. But Emeka Egbuka cannot be kept off the football field. He is healthy and ready to rock. Mike Evans, broken clavicle or collarbone, out for the year. Godwin, I believe, is also out, so that leaves it to Egbuka, Johnson & Johnson, and Otton, of course. So I expect him to get his targets, but going up against the New Orleans Saints and how he's been used in the more touchdown advantageous positions. I'm not too sure about his upside this week. And Ingram, again, going up against the Cowboys defense, I like that a lot. They're going to need to keep up with the Cowboys offense, and I really like the thought of Ingram getting himself into the double-digit fantasy point finish this week, certainly from a PPR perspective. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Check out the Substack podcast and rankings over at fatherdynasty.com. And, of course, the Substack, it's either at that website if you want to, or if you have the Substack app itself, you can, of course, subscribe to Faux Football there as well. That will include the Substack, the podcast, and the rankings are on the website. The podcast itself, it's on the Substack, or if you so choose, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you're going to find it there as well. YouTube as well, just to mention another. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, hit me up on Twitter at FatherDynasty, and have a happy and healthy Week 8.